Well, g'day everybody. Welcome to another portfolio review. Today's video is Farscape, the TV series. I started working on Farscape in 1998 as a matte painter, and I worked on the first season. That's it. I didn't work on season 2 or beyond, just season 1. And I will go through as many of the matte paintings as I can, just to show you at least the volume of what I worked on. One of the things that I wanted to do with Farscape, or at least my time on that in that first season, was to never repeat a matte painting. And by what I mean by that is that in Star Trek and all the TV shows we'd seen up to that point, a lot of the matte paintings were reused. They may have regraded it and turned a day matte painting into a night matte painting, but it was essentially the same matte painting. And if you're familiar with The Next Generation and Voyager and some of these types of shows, particularly The Next Generation, you would have seen certain matte paintings that were reused for multiple different cultures and multiple different episodes as a generic, some other culture, some other place they'd, visited, some other planet, and it was this generic futuristic city. And we got to see some of those paintings quite often. You might see a Klingon homeworld, and then you would see that regraded as a nighttime matte painting. And it was one thing I didn't want to do. So one of the things I wanted to make sure we didn't do was repeat that process. And if it meant extra work, and if it meant going that extra mile, I wanted to provide a better point of view, or a different point of view of that scene with a new matte painting, if possible, if time allowed. Not saying we achieved that, but if possible, that was the goal. So that we always had a fresh view of what that next scene might be, rather than just a rehash of the same matte painting. Now I understand that back in the 90s, 80s and 90s, Star Trek didn't have the luxury of that because they were still painting on glass. Well, in the digital age, we could be a little bit more flexible. Just to give you a quick timeline of the history here, I had finished working on The Fifth Element in Los Angeles in 1997, April 1997, and I moved back to Melbourne, Australia. And for a year, I worked in a small post-production company in Melbourne called Complete Post. And then I moved to Sydney and started working on Farscape, I think around September, sometime like that, of 1998. And then we went through, I think, till about October, November 99. And that was when I finished working on Farscape. So I had a full year of working on The Fifth Element, which was great training. And then I had a year of working in a smaller company where we mostly worked on TV commercials and so on. And that was also good training because Farscape was a TV show. Okay, so as you can see here, what we have is what we are somewhat familiar with today in terms of the resolution of a screen or of our media. And this is 4K. So this is 4096 in this dimension by, I'll go over here, 2160 in this dimension, in the vertical. Okay, so what we have here is 2K, which is 2048 resolution in that dimension by 1080 in that direction. And this little blue square here is PAL resolution, which is 720 by 576 pixels. So we were working in very, very small images. So the 2K resolution here is basically what we created The Fifth Element. Most of our matte paintings were larger size as required for any camera movements and so on, but the final film output was 2K. And the final output for Farscape was PAL Res 720. Now, what that meant was I would probably paint in something like 2K resolution if necessary, or at least double PAL, which was 1440. But as you can see how times have changed, how small that resolution window is compared to something like 4K. My small Olympus camera can shoot 4K resolution video without any qualms whatsoever. And I regularly paint concept art these days at a resolution of 6K, 6.5K, and in one instance I did a painting for foundation which was 10K. A little bit overkill, but it was nice. Now, because of the small size of these images, I'm going to have to blow up and magnify and zoom in to a lot of these matte paintings because there just isn't enough real estate. They're just not big enough. So if they look a bit fuzzy and a bit soft, it's because I'm forced to zoom in. We don't have much choice about that. So anyway, onwards, and let's check out the images. We didn't have a lot of information about what was in the script, what the stories were at the time. We weren't privy to a lot of that stuff. We were just told some things about the story and about the episode, and we were given a certain brief for that job, and then you just went off and created it. And what I tried to do with this simple planet shot was to create a little bit of highlighting of any areas that were water. So I mapped, we had access to a lot of the NASA satellite photographs of Earth, which I repainted and regraded and made different shapes and so on, and different continent shapes and whatnot. And I also painted these specularity maps, or I mapped portions of these planetary images onto a sphere, and then we could get specularity. Now, none of these shots were animated. What you're looking at is just a flat 2D image. And if anything, the only movement that was probably necessary or probably evident was nothing more than a two-dimensional move, left or right across the screen as Moya or another ship would come through. These planets weren't rotating. There was no animation in terms of that sort of thing. But it gave me flexibility of reusing the one map and the one 3D planet that I can then just reposition and re-render and then tweak as needed for the next shot. So as you can see, this is a different part of the map. It's a different part of the image. This was a nighttime scene. Some of these might look a little washed out, a little light than they should be, given that it's a nighttime and we're looking at city lights and so on. But again, it's TV, and the idea is to provide matte paintings that have a little bit more detail, and they can be regraded down in compositing as necessary later on. These tracks here, these lights across these roads, they're just a little bit too straight. This is a little more like it, but this here, this would just not exist. The terrain looks too rough. This would be more natural here. So I got some things right and some things wrong with this. This road here would be a little more natural for the terrain. Maybe this here in these flat, sandy, sort of plain areas, but this goes into rougher terrain. So at this point I should have, changed the shape of the line here of that road. Same with here, over there, over here, particularly in here. It's a little odd. It's not very organic. This is okay. Not so much that. There should have been a lot more organicness in terms of the lines going on. And all of these city lights down here, they would have been made to glow in the compositing phase. Let me just pull up several of them together because it's going to take a while to get through all of these. And I'll just stick with these three for the time being. So as you can see, every single matte shot of this particular planet, I tried my best to create new perspectives, new points of view. So it wasn't the same matte painting over and over again. And here is an example of the entire planet in two different lighting situations that we never used to see in the Star Trek matte paintings. Again, they were painted on glass, they were traditional matte paintings, and I understand that. But as our filmmaking tools improve, we're able to improve on the verisimilitude of reality, or the reality we imbue into these scenes. Now, as you can see from my folder here, I've still got the shot numbers. Shot number FX078 and FX079. We'll go to 078 You can also see down here in my metadata for the files, date created, 19th of the 11th, 1998, 11:44 p.m. That's weird. I'm not sure why that's 11:44 p.m. That's quite late. We did work late, I have to admit. There were plenty of nights we worked very late. It doesn't mean I did all of this at 11 o'clock at night or quarter to 12 at night. I'd say it's more like I maybe set up a few things and left the file for the next day and then kept painting. Portfolio review. This image is not very clear at all. Now, what this shot was about, from memory, it was a tilt down. This guy here and everything down here is the live action. Or at least the live action was down here someplace. And I've blended this photograph, because this bottom part was a photograph that I took in an old abandoned power station. And I think we managed to blend it down into live action. It was further down here someplace. And the shot, I believe, was a tilt up into this scene. Now, as a matte painting, it's not very clear. I guess it's quite atmospheric and so on and so forth. But there is an enormous amount wrong with this. This radar dish thing is way too sharp. This light and details are too sharp. This venting is way too sharp. But this texture that I've used, the rock texture here, the blacks in here, they're strangely black or dark, but not in here in the vents where they should be. The black levels are just all over the place. And there's this ginormous ship here, which is denoting some level of scale. And yet these vents are enormously big, given the scale of this ship. And it doesn't really read. This tower structure doesn't really read. And the black levels of this ship are just way out. So I don't mind this part though. Although mind you, the black levels in here aren't as black as what's going on in here. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there either. That line is too sharp. That's too sharp. That's too sharp. Everything on here is too sharp. This is too sharp. My God, everything's sharp. That's too sharp, that line. There's way too much detail. It's all bad. I don't remember what this ship was. It's not Moya, and I don't remember why it's there, just that it's a shipyard or it's a big docking yard of some sort. But anyway, it was cool. At the time, it was cool, and at the time, I enjoyed it. But as a matte painting, it doesn't read very well. I think there was a ship coming down, like flying from behind us, and it flies overhead and goes down this direction. So it might have been a tilt down shot, not a tilt up. It's pretty obvious what the live action is in this particular matte painting. We have our two heroes, Crichton and Aaron. When I say things are too sharp in a matte painting, most of this is too sharp, and it's sharper than the photography, than the existing photography, which is okay because it can be softened in compositing, and it usually was. So it's better to be too sharp than not sharp enough. But I guess what I'm talking about is relative sharpness. Things in the background of the matte painting could have been softened off compared to some of the things in the foreground of the matte painting that can remain sharp. So when the whole thing is softened, at least it looks like there's a natural progression of sharpness towards the foreground compared to the background. So again, this is all, you know, super sharp. This big shipbuilding structure going on here. The lights aren't particularly organic. I think it was just I'm not sure how I did those. They look like a texture, and they're not very well lined up either. Oh my God. So I've got these lines here, and yet these windows are sloping off that line. So that, and there, tisk. Not very good. This might have been a tilt down. We slowly tilt down to reveal the live action. And then from there we go into the characters. Layers here. So I've got, these are all my original layers, by the way. Perspective lines. Oh, there's a foreground platform. I don't know whether we use that. I can't remember. When I remove the live action, or there's a revealing of some of the live action, or should I say, when we remove the live action, we can see a little bit more of what's going on with the matte painting. Now, I think some of this down in here is from The Fifth Element. Like I said, you always take stuff from one matte painting, one film project, and you slip it into the next one for no other reason than to keep you sane in those long late nights at crunch time. Now, I should point out, you Farscape fans are going to hate me because I really don't know much about Farscape. I worked on the first season. We thought it was the wackiest thing ever. It was like, what the hell is with this puppet? It was just a little bit left of center and a bit odd and a bit strange, which I believe has worked in its favor all these years, and it's become a bit of a cult classic. And I have to admit to not watching any of the episodes after the first season. When I finished my work on it, that was the last I saw of it. So please forgive me, Farscape fans. I can assure you these were painted with love. But back in the day, it was new. It was a show that had never come out. Nobody knew what this was. In the years that have since passed, it is obviously been imbued with fan love and attention and care and investment, and I appreciate that greatly. But so please forgive me if I call something the wrong name, or I don't know the name of this ship here, and it was a long time ago. But I will endeavour to catch up on the Farscape series if I get time. Alright, so this was Commerce Planet, and these were the first two big matte paintings that I worked on for the show. Ep 2. Alright, now these are just planet shots again. Now, as you can see, these are basically NASA shots. There's an addition or a change to the plate that we had, the reference photography that we had was just adding this city lights and so on down here. And this one was a shot, I believe, of Moya going from the right of frame and then flying around in this direction, going into the shadow of the planet. So when you see a shot like this, my frame or my guidelines here are set to 720 by 576, and the matte painting is roughly matched to it, slightly higher than necessary. So Moya would be in here someplace. This is the framing, so we're looking at approximately 2 and a bit frame lengths, and the frame would just move across like this, following the ship, or that way, whichever way it went. Not sure what was going on with this particular shot or this particular matte, but every single one of these shots, as you can see, are different. They weren't a repeat of each other. Just to give you an idea of how small these frames are, this is actually 720, that frame right there. 720 by 576, it's tiny by today's standards, so I have to zoom in just to get any idea of what's going on. I'll explain what this fuzziness is in a minute, but my job was to put this ship in between all the trees here. Is I get given 10 frames that are averaged together, because when you're doing a matte painting on footage, you want the smoothest possible frame without noise and without grain, so they take 10 frames averaged together. And if there's any movement in the frame, well, you get this blurriness going on. Anyway, nothing super exciting about these particular shots. This one was a bigger deal. My apologies if I don't know the name of the episode. All I know is that it's episode 2. This is the Prowler that Crichton takes, and there's Crichton there. So just in this little area, let me see if I can do a... Okay, so one of the little tricks of matte painting is you will have live action, like this area here. So there's Crichton. That is your 720 PAL, and it's shrunk down, and then you paint around it. So you can reduce a frame and put it into a much larger context of a matte painting, and then it's recomposited as the whole frame. And so we would see Crichton maybe walking, across within the space between here to here, and within that movement, within that small area, and the time it takes him to walk from here to here, for example, that's the end of the shot. And this was this big jungle scene that I pieced together out of a variety of different photographs that I'd shot and photographed. This was some junk I'd photographed at some point. Same with this down here. There's concrete and whatnot. And then there's another one of these. Same model ship that we used in the first Commerce Planet. Just same 3D model. And we were using 3D models back then too, by the way. A lot of the, I think all of the ships in, yes, of course, all of the ships were 3D models. None of the ships were miniatures in any way. Fairly rudimentary. I would have done this ship very differently today. Again, but that's just, that's just knowing, having 20 years of experience on top of what you were doing back then. But I would say this is probably one of the more successful paintings that I did for the show. All right, this is where I got to. We'll get to that. We'll get to these ones in a minute. But let's start with this and these and that. This was a photograph back here, which is quite soft. There's a few sharp pieces here and there, but this is soft. If this is soft, that should be soft, and that's way too sharp. This is too sharp, and that's sharp. This is sharp, and this is soft. So this is wrong. And I'm not very happy about all of this. It's not holding up as particularly natural. Yeah, it's not working. And here's the live action plate. You can see this is quite soft. The natural photography is actually quite soft. You can paint much sharper than you can the photography. And then when this is composited back in, it's softened off. But as far as sharpness in a matte painting is concerned, it should be consistent. And this is definitely not consistent. On that edge there, I'm shaking my head over that one. I don't know what that building was. I don't remember what that building was, but that's the 3D version of it, or that's the 3D model, or the rendered 3D model with textures and so on. And then a loose composite into a live action frame. I needed to get an idea of what the angle was and all that sort of stuff. And this one, I think the matte painting is everything. Somewhere, it looks to be, I'm not sure, maybe there. I'm not entirely sure. So the matte painting is everything up here. I can't quite remember. Let's see, what is do I have? All right, there we go. That's better. Let's look at the layers themselves, shall we? Makes life easier. So that's the live action. Crane with lights and so on and so forth. And this is the process of building up that matte painting. I should have done this with the others as well. And then just some extra details up here. I don't know what that was. Oh, there was a ship there. There we go. Here's our 3D ship. Let's go to the next one. So let's do that, shall we? Turn off the matte painting work and let's go to the live action. So this was an old train shed, I believe. Obviously there's the blue screen. You can see the blurring again. So this is a frame that's been averaged. Okay, so that's what I've done is repainted the whole thing. So this is outside that viewpoint. Train line or train tracks. There's a cut out piece of the live action, which I've thrown back in over the top of the matte painting. Some levels adjustment, not that I really needed that. And then a repainting of what's going on here. So that's right. And then an extension to that pole. I would have possibly graded that whole background slightly cooler, just to give it a bit of color interest back there. It's a little on the, there's not a lot of color in that. That helps. Now that could have been achieved by the compositor, and maybe they did, I'm not sure. But I certainly could have added a bit more color into that background to help things out. I think these poles and the columns are a little bit too light. I know that's darkening the whole thing, but let's do that. They'd be quite dark, although again, something down here we might need to add a bit of, look at this, I'm already painting, I'm matte painting. I'm re-matte painting a Farscape matte painting, I don't believe it. I wonder if I could send the shot back in, say, hey, look guys, I've fixed it, it's better. Maybe you can composite this back in. All right, I'm going to actually save that. This one, this is my favorite matte painting of the entire show. This is my Indiana Jones. This is my Raiders matte painting. This is the Raiders of the Lost Ark end credit sequence, or end credits matte painting. The famous matte painting. When I saw this particular, let's go down to live action, so we'll turn all this off. All right, that's the live action. Okay, that's the live action. A few of these boxes for a set piece, a line of something in order to break the floor, and whatever these bags were full of God knows what, plants or something, and all these containers full of supplies. So this was the perfect opportunity to pull off a Raiders of the Lost Ark version. All right, so that's the basic. Now, obviously, I had lots of layers and stuff with this particular version. Now, let's take a closer look. Now, there are some aspects of the painting that are sharper than the photography, as you can see here. But again, we're looking for relative sharpness from, say, foreground and background. And particularly where areas are lit, like up here. And where it's not lit, and background things. Now, I think I painted that box in there as the Raiders of the Lost Ark box. And then I put a couple of other wooden boxes in there as well. So this is most definitely the Raiders box, or this one covered in a tarp. I can't remember. Or was that one? As you can see, it's very soft, very loose. Now this one was a little trickier. So we've got then we've got this big support structure going on here. That may have benefited from being a little darker. That could have worked. Yeah, that could still work fine. It didn't need to be as light. That certainly could have been dropped down a little more. Let's hit OK, shall we? Okay, so they're cables, overhanging struts, a little atmosphere. That's a shadow. Now, one of the things that we did with this shot, there's a train that goes through on this rail here. Now, what you may have just noticed then is a version of, okay, that. I've got a layer here that is, here comes a train now. I usually edit those out, but I'm going to leave this one. It's appropriate to this particular shot. What happened with this particular shot here is we have this train coming through on this rail, and the train has a light on it. So I painted a version of these boxes, and some of these boxes here lit. So as the train goes through, seriously? As the train goes through, the compositor could ramp the light up on this particular layer and then remove the light or remove the layer back to sort of ambient shadow after the train has passed. Same with the light on this flag just here. Right, same on the top of the rail. I've got light across the top of the rail as well. And there's that flag. Let's see, what else do we have over here? Okay, so that's another rail, another flag. And we had guys very carefully, just very slowly animate these, just slightly moving. This particular flag down here moves a lot more. I think they animated that quite a lot. So as the train went past it, blew this flag a little bit more. Chains hanging, and I think we had these chains sort of slowly just moving around. Some pipe work, extra chains, extra chains. I've used these chains multiple times in multiple matte paintings and concept art pieces since then. So yeah, this is one I'm reasonably proud of. Apart from the value of this big internal support column that I've just changed, I think that helps it. But it's pretty close. I'm happy with it. I wouldn't redo this. This has got its own magic, and I'm very, very happy with that. And it's one of the paintings I'm proud of. This one was cool. This fire pit. There were two versions of this one. There was a close-up and a wide shot. Yeah, there you go. So there's some aspects of the, sometimes this is what matte painting was. It was little sections, parts. You just fill in these little bits and they were composited back in later as needed. This is the work we do as a matte painter sometimes. It's not all the big, wide, epic shots. Sometimes it's a lot of little pieces that are just used to fill in some part of a painting or some part of a shot. There's the green screen floor, the stands painted partly green. Now just desaturated that green out and then extend down below that. Like I said, they're not all glamorous. This one was a lot more dynamic. Now remember, before I said sometimes you can take a live action frame, a 720 PAL res frame that is reduced down in size. That's a terrible arrow. I call myself an artist and I can't even draw an arrow. So the frame is reduced and then you paint around it for a much wider frame, for a much wider scene. Live action. Now, given that this live action frame is already very wide, this is a wide lens, it's a very wide lens, so making it wider is almost a little bit too extreme. Some of the distortion that was going on, if I followed the perspective correctly, the distortion was just getting way out of hand. So the vignetting helps to focus our attention down into here, and it gives us a sense of height and vertigo and all that kind of stuff. I should have got rid of that green down there, although I don't know whether that's, yeah, it's live action. So, oh no, I painted it into the extension. Tisk, tisk. I should have got rid of some of that green because that green down here is from the green screen. It doesn't belong at all. So one thing I have no control of here is that things like my fridge, sound of my fridge, trains outside, traffic, I don't realize they're happening because I live here and I hear the sounds every day, all day. Speak of the devil, here comes another train. And I don't notice those sounds, so my fridge just, went into quiet mode and I didn't even know it was running. So here's another planet. I don't know what was going on with this. It was maybe some horrible sulfuric atmosphere. Who knows? I don't know. Ep11. Oh, this is another cool one. Okay, this was pretty cool. But before we get to the cool stuff, let's just go through the boring planets. Okay, this was the desert planet. Okay, so there's two points of view. Again, two separate planet shots, just to keep it interesting, so we're not reusing the same one over and over again. Was that off? Sorry, three planet shots. There's one hidden there. This looks very similar and may have been from the original Commerce Planet, Ep1. I can see these kind of outlines here. So I think what I've done is I've just filled in where the water used to be and I've just filled it in with dirt and removed any ocean. Darmok on the ocean. Jalad on the ocean. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. One of the best episodes of science fiction TV ever. This was pretty cool. I like this one. We had to shoot up just north of Sydney. There's a area called Stockton, and there's a range of sand dunes along the beach or along the coast. They go for quite a while, and it's a large area of dunes. And I shot a whole bunch of photography in a whole bunch of sand dunes. And we were there, I think, for about 2 or 3 days while I was shooting this ep. And I got to go up there and shoot, hang out on the set and all that sort of thing. And it was overcast and it was drizzling with rain and there was no light whatsoever. And on the very last morning, the sun had come out and I got a few shots of some nice afternoon or morning light on the sand dunes. And this Dambata station was just a pencil sketch. It was a very small pencil sketch I did in my little sketchbook and I scanned it, and that became the basis for the painting, and then I just painted over that. All right, let's go through the layers. So that's a sky. I don't know whether that was shot at the time. It might have been, it might not have been. Some weird lines in there. It's a little bit grainy. So back in the day, we didn't have digital cameras to go and snap skies and shoot skies. We had to shoot film. Oh, I know what those lines are. They're scratches. That's what those lines are. And they're scratches on the film. I'd forgot that actually happened. I'd forgot that used to happen. There'd be dust and dirt and scratches all over the film. And if you ever needed to use any, photography, you had to scan transparencies or negatives, and then you had to retouch out all the scratches and all the dust. Now, these are working from sort of background to foreground, so this is going to look a little out of place as these ships just appear. And these were all 2D shapes, just 2D black silhouette shapes that, again, I've just painted light onto to give them form and shape. All right, so let's go up. So that's another background tower of some sort, another ship, and then the depot itself. Background, far background station of some description, and the sand dunes, bit of atmosphere, foreground dunes, and our live action character. Because I think in the shot, this guy looks up as Crichton's ship flies over towards the base. He turns around and looks up and watches him fly over. I've since repainted this. Here is a small, you can tell this is most definitely an oil painting. And if not for the texture, the canvas texture, this could have possibly worked as a matte painting. I mean, it's pretty loose and it would require a little extra work, but back in the day, given the resolution, I could have painted this reasonably large, say on a 0.5 meter by, panel or illustration board with gouache. And this was done in oil paint, by the way. I could have done this as a small, gouache or acrylic painting, and that could have worked as an actual matte painting. It could have worked in the context of that shot. No problem at all. But yeah, I really like this shot. So obviously I had done this, so it was easy to redraw and copy onto here. The grading is a little out, but that might be just the way I've scanned it. This was 12 inches across, just to give you an idea. This was a small 12-inch painting. That's since been sold. Yeah, this was pretty fun. Okay, so this was down closer to the ground level, or at ground level, looking up into this station. And let's turn off all the layers and have a bit of a squiz. So yeah, this was the live action frame. There's a ship kind of docking and taking on fuel of some sort underneath that. I know these don't make any sense as I turn them on, but once you turn that on like that, it starts to make a bit more sense. Antennas and so on and so forth, bit of atmosphere, and then a recopy of that live action frame back over the top of the matte painting. I would redo this very differently today. Again, it's a little bit too simplistic. Let's zoom in and take a look. I mean, I still use some of the same techniques, but using a lot of this sort of industrial so on and these textures to create this idea or the idea of detail and openings and structure. I still use some of these same techniques, but the general overall shape here isn't very interesting. I guess it reads in its simplest form. It's pretty rudimentary. The design of the place itself is rudimentary, but this isn't working for me. It's too simple, too blocky. And this round platform here is not working. And the perspective is not working either, I don't think. Nor is that. The perspective of that, and that, and that. I don't know whether they actually meet at a vanishing point. I mean, I would have attempted that. I did no perspective. But this here is, for some reason, that ellipse is not right. No, it's not working for me either. It's a little odd. Let's have a look at these ones, and let's take a look at this guy first. And again, let's open up the layers and see what's what. Okay, so we've got our two heroes, Aaron and Crichton, in a hot tub, as you do. And that's the live action frame somewhere in about there. That would have been the frame. And then again, my job was to extend up. So let's start from the back. Now again, this was one of these 2D, it's what's called a 2D camera move. So there's no 3D camera move, it's just an image moving in a two-dimensional plane. Okay, so that's roughly the format of the shot, and the shot started way up here. And what happens is there's just the image is moved just in a 2D plane, down, 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 down to the live action. So the live action frame is composited into that, and it's a move on the live action. So there's movement, these guys are talking, but it's also a two-dimensional move on a still or locked off shot. But this was not a 3D. These days this would be a 3D shot, and you would animate a 3D camera from tilting up and then tilting down or panning down into this environment space, and then you would match it with this live action here. You would match the 3D camera to the camera actually used on set, and it would be a lot more pleasing. Certainly have a feeling of correct perspective, photographic perspective. This was budget TV. You have to remember that back in those days, 3D was rather expensive and time consuming to achieve, and it's not as easy to, wasn't as easy back then as it is today to pull these sorts of things off. So that was really cool. This episode was, matte painting wise, was quite interesting from a technical point of view. And what I'm going to do is show you both of these together. So we see the top of this tree, this ancient tree. I can't remember what it was, but some kind of ancient tree that was grown into this temple. And this particular shot here, this was a continuous shot. So we had this bottom portion here was the set. And again, another one of these 2D moves. Let's see if I can get the... Now down here, I think I've got, there we go. There's the live action. So you can see that line there is denoting the frame. So the frame wasn't just smaller, but it was also offset to the left. Crichton's looking up, and then the camera does this. And it keeps going up this tree. And as it gets up to here, it blends in with this particular shot here. Good old Dargo. G'day, mate. How's it going? All right, so this was nothing more than placing our 3D ship. I have no idea what this was called. And then just some painting and, boy, again, God, I wish I could go back and redo some of this stuff with what we know. A little bit of atmosphere. This would have been the actor on the day in that environment. Same with that. And I think there probably would have been shadow. They would have shadowed him for some, with a cutter of some description just to cut the sunlight out, knowing that there was going to be this ship. And then as Dargo walks out from underneath the shadow of the ship, he comes into the sunlight. Yeah, there's so much, boy, I could have done with that. But that was the day, that was the late 90s. This was probably a photograph of Jupiter, which I've then smeared and stretched out. This is just using a smudge tool, I'm guessing. It's that tool there. Like that, I can smudge everything. So that's probably what that was, just to give that effect. Extra light, bit of glow. Bada boom. Big bada boom. And a much wider version of that, of course. This was one of the first instances of projecting this matte painting onto 3D geometry. This is badly lit. Not happy with this one. It's a kind of weird perspective too. This is extreme perspective in here. If you look at these in the vanishing points and the vanishing lines, they're all over the place. If you watched my last portfolio review of The Fifth Element, you might recognize this texture. I told you I throw these textures into everything I do, if the subject warrants it, of course. This one here, this one here, this one here. Yeah, there's more of these little openings that the live action was shot in. It's all over the place. My God, this is just all, look at the lighting in here. I've got these really hard shadows going on in this. Light from back there someplace. It's not a good look. Not a good look. So I think it sort of, we zoom in, hopefully fast enough that we don't see any of those problems. Let's get rid of that before people start looking at it too closely. And they do ask for their money back. All right, that's got a ton of layers, so we can play with that one. Have a tour of that. So once again, this is, we go over here. So this was another 2D move. So there's a ship flying in from left to right, and we pan with the ship that comes in and flies into this docking bay. And then the camera would slow down and settle as the ship lands. Again, I've got these textures that I've used, originated from the Fifth Element, and that I've continued using. This one's a little better. The lighting's a little more consistent. This whole structure, this opening, this space here was real. Just not as big as this. It wasn't the size where you could park a spaceship in, but it was actually part of an old power station. There was a big old generator sitting, or used to sit in this space here. As you can see, a lot of these beams up here have been cut off as they decommissioned the station, but I didn't have to worry too much about the perspective because it was already there in the photograph that I shot of the space. It's a really cool place too, this old abandoned power station. For anyone who's interested in Sydney, it's the White Bay Power Station. There's another one of those textures. Some of it in here. I don't know where this light's coming from. I've got light glinting off this, highlights glinting off this pipework, and I don't know where that's coming from. Where's that light? I don't know. I've got light coming down here hitting this stuff, but I don't know where that's coming from. This is probably one of my better examples of the work at the time. All right. So here are some of these. This is a portion of the live action. I think that's Dargo down there. So this was all real. This is these old gun emplacement, concrete gun emplacement things they had in Sydney. Some very bad photoshopping of this into the remainder of this, which is all made up and matte painted and a little blended over and messed up. Again, perspective is everywhere. It was all over the place. Jesus. In my defense, these shots were relatively quick. So, like a good matte painting, it's designed to give the impression of what's there. You don't want people lingering too long and picking out any of those things. It's in most cases, it's just stuff in the background that gives the sense of what is there without it actually describing what is really there. There's really no point. And when you've got something like this, there should be movement. And again, I suspect, well, this particular matte painting is quite big in terms of its overall resolution. So I wonder, this might have been a pull out, like a zoom out, 3846 pixels. Wow, that was big for the time. That was really big for the time. So I suspect that live action seems to fit roughly in there. That's 72576 frames. So I'm guessing that that was the live action plate somewhere in there. And then I think what's happened is we've zoomed out to reveal this overall frame. And as you do in these matte paintings, you always throw silly little things in. Here's a bunch of us VFX guys, which we photographed. I think, where did we photographed ourselves outside someplace and roughly matched up the perspective, and then I pasted them all in. There's a friend of mine, Scotty, who's, I believe, farting. So there's that ship in the docking space. Unfortunately, there was no real lighting in this. This could have really benefited from some strong lighting someplace, or interesting lighting, I should say. Not so much strong, but interesting. There's no real plan on where this light was coming from. unfortunately. Again, another one that could have been really interesting. Well, so my involvement ends with these two planetary shots, and I don't quite remember what this one was. Gamek asteroid. Oh, that might have been where that station was. That might have been this station. It was very grey and dull and watery. I think that's what it was. Gamek asteroid. I think that's what that was. Well, and one last planet. Well, so ends the tour of my Farscape matte painting work. But I had a tremendous amount of fun on this one. It was a good job. I also met some really great people on this production. Some who've remained friends ever since. Very good friends ever since. Where are we? Let's close that with the Raiders matte painting, shall we? I hope you enjoyed the little tour of some of the matte painting work. Not all of it. Like I said, the visual effects supervisor, he also painted the other half, if you like. While I was doing some episodes, he was doing the others, so we were leapfrogging. Well, all you Farscape fans, I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane into matte painting world of the first season of Farscape, where it all began. All right, everybody, a little surprise. I didn't expect to find these, and I certainly didn't expect to find them so soon after recording the Farscape matte painting work, but guess what I've dug up? These are original 35mm transparencies that I shot on set or location, and I'm going to go through some of them. So these were shot during the making of Farscape. So this is actual real shots of the production of some of the stuff, not all of it, not a lot of it, but just some of it. So let's have a closer look. All right, so let's have a close look. Just going to kind of flit around from frame to frame, but we'll see what we see. But let's start off with our favorite two characters. Now these are a little dark. Let's see, I might open these up a little bit because the slides themselves are a little dark. But there's our two favorite heroes from Farscape. Now let's kind of just move around a little. Yo, what's happening over there? Let's focus him a little bit better. There we go. So what I'm going to do, that's a guy named Peter Pound. He was the visual effects coordinator. This is the director of one of the episodes, Tony, I forgot his surname. I'll probably flash it up on the screen, but that's Tony. A couple of extras hanging around as they do on set, a location. Some of those dudes hanging about. There's Claudia holding an umbrella for somebody. Coming through a doorway. Back to that one. Hey, what about this Crichton guy, huh? Is it gonna rain? It was a miserable couple of days in terms of weather. It was drizzling most of the time, and I think he probably was looking up at the rain, hoping for sunshine. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm waiting on, I've got to borrow a lens. I've got to borrow a lens from a friend, a macro lens. What I'm going to do is re-photograph these with a macro lens and a slide film copier. So I'm going to re-photograph these at really high resolution. And then what I'll do is I'll post them on either back on YouTube and or my Twitter account for everybody to see and have a look and enjoy. Explosions, lots of umbrellas because of the rain. It was warm, it was nice weather, but it was just wet. Forgive me, Farscape fans, because I don't remember these characters necessarily. Wait, don't fall off the light box. Let me just drop. Some of these are exposed okay, and some are not exposed that well, so let's turn that down a fraction. Ben Browder holding his script, going, oh, what is this show about? What the hell did I get myself into? Some more smoke and explosions. There's our train station, or our train depot. These are all photographs I took on the set. Some of that industrial stuff. Let's look for more. There we go. Some of these frames are probably be somewhat familiar. That's Peter Pound, the VFX coordinator, and Paul Butterworth, who was the visual effects supervisor. Some more of the extras. Fooling around in front of a blue screen. Back to the sand dunes. Ooh, try not to knock the camera. Alright, so these are some of the shots of the weather that came in after. This was, I think, literally the last day and the last afternoon down on those beaches. It was turned out quite beautiful that last morning, that last day. This is the coast of New South Wales, Australia. There's same director, Tony. Ben Browder again hanging about. That's that quarry, dull grey looking quarry. Let's open this, let's brighten this up a little bit because it's a bit, there we go. Desolate quarry that we shot that episode in. I don't know who that was. Might have been Peter Pound again. There's a close-up of the, or a distant shot of the set. This guy's gone, how do I get out of this chicken shit outfit? What are you doing? I don't know, what are you doing? More sets. People sitting around. Film industry is so cruisy, man. People just sit around and laugh and drink pina coladas and gin and tonics all day long. Different episode. Probably recognize that as the basis of that shipwreck shot. Obviously, sans the bridge. So that's, I think that was one of those shots where the prowler was parked, and turn these down a bit. They're a bit dark. Sorry. It's a little, that actual slide is overexposed. There's not a lot of detail in that, so I don't remember too much about what was going on with this particular episode and what this building was. An extra getting all dressed up. General crew standing around, having cigarettes, lazing about. It's just more of the landscape of the area. Things like that. There's the set way down in the distance. Well, hello there. How do you do? Peter Pound driving off behind one of those buggy things. Peter Pound again. The set again. Well, as you can see, the lighting's quite dull. It was a very flat day, or flat couple of days. I didn't get the chance to go out onto set too often. It was just a couple of times where I was lucky enough to go out and do a little bit of supervision and shoot backgrounds for the matte painting work if necessary. So I guess I was lucky enough to get some of these. So that's all I've got of the 35mm slides for Farscape. Really happy I found these, because what I'll do is I will rephotograph these and post as many of them as I can. It'll take a little while just to get them rephotographed, but I'll do those in the coming weeks, hopefully. So hope you enjoyed these. And yeah, well, hit the like button if you like. Hit the subscribe button if you like even more. And I'll talk to you guys later. Take it easy.